you all for joining us. And what I'd like to suggest is, at least for now, during the presentation, everyone mute your phones. And then when we're done with the presentation, we hope to have plenty of time for questions. That'll just take out any noise or feedback as we're going through this. So I'm not sure how much everyone's had a chance to read all the information we've put out there. I'm going to just really give a general overview, a little bit on RISA, and in particular the call for proposals that we have out there. We have information in what we call the federal funding opportunity that the Climate Program Office put out, which includes the RISA competition. And then we have our specific information sheet for the Climate and Societal Actions group that Adam leads that includes RISA. So the RISA details are in that. So at the end, the last slide, I'll show you where you can access those, because it's very important you read both of those documents, because they have different and significant information for you. We're going to talk today a little bit about overall RISA program objectives, a little bit about some of the partners that we've listed in the call for proposals, a little bit about the specific priorities and the review criteria, and then we should have time for some questions, because really this is mostly an opportunity for you all to ask questions of Adam and me as we're doing these webinars. So, jumping ahead. So the RISA program, and this is, I'm going to do this because I know some of you know a lot about RISA, but we might have some new people on the phone. So I'm going to just give an overview of RISA and our philosophy for it. So RISA supports research teams. We currently cover 11 regions of the U.S. That help expand and build the nation's capacity for preparing and adapting to climate variability and change. And we always say both variability and change, because RISA's got its roots in understanding natural climate variability, as well as really probably in more recent years looking as well at climate change. So we feel that RISA has a comparative advantage in really understanding the natural system and the diagnostics of that and the predictions of that, as well as longer-term change. And central to the RISA philosophy are commitments to process, partnerships, and trust. And we say this because RISA is very much a mixture of research and engagement. And so for us, even studying the engagement process is important, as well as the ongoing and iterative nature of the engagement process. RISA's work a lot with a whole range of partners, from local, state, and federal entities to NGOs to the private sector. And a lot of the success in trying to ensure that people understand climate information, understand better what their options are, and can plan for the future is really building trust with the decision-making communities. And as we know, that can take a fair amount of time and effort and energy, so that's really core to the RISA philosophy as well. We like to use this next slide in terms of distinguishing where we see RISA on the spectrum of research to working with decision makers. We see RISA really in the middle under usable science, and it's important for us to convey that this is not just about applied climate science, but it's a whole range of usable science, from understanding the context that decision makers face, so not just their needs, but how they make decisions and perceive information, understanding risk and management decisions in that context. We talk about sustaining knowledge networks, because RISAs need to be part of larger networks that they can tap into in terms of developing new information, collaborating, and disseminating information. We talk about innovating services because we try to experiment with different ways of developing information with partners, disseminating that information, new tools and processes to do that. So it's seen as experimental but not operational. There are other parts of NOAA and other federal agencies for the operational services side. And then we talk about learning through practice, because a lot of this is how can we learn through working with decision makers, developing new knowledge, building collaborations, and learn and study that, and come up with even new methods and approaches for that. And on the right side, you can see that RISAs draw from a whole range of disciplines, from the social and behavioral sciences through the natural, physical, and even engineering sciences, as well as communication and education expertise. And the left side is a whole range of sectors that the network works with, and this is determined by what's important in the region, not so much that each RISA has to cover all of these different decision-making systems. So this is our current map of the RISA network. As you can see, we cover 11 regions. As you saw in our call for proposals, we have 6 regions that are up for competition this year. And as you know, it's Pacific Islands, the Pacific Northwest, what we is now covered by Western Water, the Intermountain West, the Southeast in U.S. with some connections with Caribbean, the Northeast, more of an urban corridor, and the Great Lakes region. And we've put in this RISA program budget history slide because we, as much as we want to expand the network, both in terms of our existing regions and other regions, we've had to deal with some pretty lean times recently in terms of budget. And that's the other reason, well, this history plus looking into next year's, the House of Representatives appropriations mark so far and the Senate mark have cut to the regional budget line, which RISA falls under. And so we have a wider range in terms of projected funding for projects. We put in the call for proposals 500 to 700,000 per year because we have been facing quite variable budgets in recent years, and we face quite a large spread in terms of the House mark and the Senate mark and what we might expect for next year. But you can see RISA draws from usually 3 different budget lines. We have our core RISA funding money, and then we have what we call NIDIS coping with drought, and we've asked, I believe Chad McNutt has joined us today from the NIDIS office to say a few words in a little while about NIDIS, because we draw from some NIDIS coping with drought resources funds, and then in recent years we've gotten some money from what NOAA terms its assessments money, which has been in support of the National Climate Assessment. And I say this because these are some of the different both opportunities and demands on the RISA program in terms of budgeting. So for this year, we are competing, as I mentioned, 6 of the regions that we have, and we stipulated general boundaries for these regions, but there's, you know, you can sort of think about this in terms of what works best for the regions. You don't have to cover every square inch of a region. You need to think a little bit about what's doable for a RISA and the resources that we're providing, but these are really sort of general boundaries that we'd like folks to consider for these different regions. We will hope to fund up to 1 RISA, and we say up to because we don't know what our budget will be, up to 1 RISA for each region. As I mentioned earlier, the NIDIS, which is National Integrated Drought Information System, is a very important program for our office here at the Climate Program Office and for NOAA. It's an interagency program, and I will ask, Chad, are you on the line with us?
Hey, Caitlin, this is Chad.
Oh, okay. So I will, maybe I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about NIDIS in the slide instead of waiting till the end. But I would just say that for us, there are a number of regions that NIDIS has pilots that maybe Chad can say a word or two about that fall in the regions that we are competing, and this is a very important partnership for the RISA program. NOAA is the lead agency. This is an interagency program, but NOAA is the lead. And we've had a history of supporting research and engagement work through the RISA program in support of the NIDIS pilots. But Chad, why don't I let you say a few words about this?
Sure. Thanks, Caitlin. So as Caitlin mentioned, the RISAs have been very important as NIDIS has developed these pilots, and I'll just say a bit about the pilots and what we've been trying to do. Real quick about NIDIS, we were created by Congress in 2006, late 2006, to create kind of an early warning information system or information network related to drought early warning. And since most of you know, drought is sort of a unique natural hazard. It's slow to onset, kind of creeps up on you, and it's a hard natural disaster to define. And so it's often defined by sectorally, it's defined in a particular region, and so it's really hard to develop an early warning system for something that is so difficult to define. So instead of thinking about an early warning system on a national level, we decided to look at it by watersheds or by regions and to try to test it out in different areas. We first started in Upper Colorado River Basin in 2009 approximately, and moved out from there to the southeast into the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint River Basin system, and then really started the Southern Plains pilot in around 2010 when the drought hit Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, and more recently have expanded to California, to the Carolinas, and are just looking at the Chesapeake. And then our latest, I guess, endeavor, which we kicked off last February, was in the Missouri River Basin. And so the way the RISAs have been supporting these pilots has really, we've been testing approaches through the RISAs, or we've been piggybacking on RISA projects that existed prior to NIDIS being created, or for us to work in a particular area. And so it's included developing webinars, using products that were funded through the RISA program or through the Sectoral Applications Research Program. So it's really involved RISAs in a lot of different ways, and has, I would say, probably been one of our biggest partners in developing these pilots and testing out how you develop early warning systems, again, on a regional basis or through a river basin. So it's been a nice partnership, and one that we would like to I guess bring forward as we look into other areas like in the Pacific Northwest, or expand the existing pilots. Does that sound good, Caitlin? Is there something else that you'd like me to hit?
No, that's great, and folks might have some questions at the end, but I guess one thing to point out is that there are several folks, in addition to Chad McNutt, who was just speaking, who are contacts for the different NIDIS pilots and what's going on in those regions. Is there a place that are you all listed on we have here listed the drought.gov website for the drought portal, but are you all listed on there, your office, Chad, and if people want to get in touch with folks at NIDIS?
Yeah, I believe there's a contact section there, and there's a list of all of us in the program office.
Okay, so I would just encourage folks that if you are going to include drought in your proposals and you have a NIDIS pilot in that region, to contact folks at the NIDIS office. So thanks, Chad. And if you think of anything else, Chad, you can chime in when we go to questions, okay?
Okay, thanks, Caitlin.
So in addition to NIDIS, which is an important partnership for RISA, NOAA has a whole range of what it considers regional partners at regional and state levels, in the case of state climatologists, across the country. We don't expect RISAs to work with every NOAA entity in their region, but certainly if there's a topic that you're working on and there's a natural collaboration that makes sense with a NOAA partner, we certainly encourage that. You can, there are all sorts of folks you can contact, or if you want to contact Adam or me or Sarah Close, who's now joined us, in terms of contacts in your region, we're happy to work with you on that. And so in terms of our regional partners, we have 6 regional climate service directors NOAA has covering the U.S. And these are NOAA federal employees who support the development and delivery of climate science and information products and services. They do that very much in the context of working within networks, including working with RISAs. We actually put this website for the RCSD directors in the information sheet for the RISA competition, and highly encourage you to contact the Regional Climate Service Director for your region. They are both a great source of information in terms of what's going on in the region, as well as a great source for networking both across NOAA and with other agencies on climate. And I think we might have 1 or 2 or so on the call, so maybe they might want to say something during the Q&A, but we certainly encourage you to work with them in terms of thinking about important topics and gaps for the region and collaborations that you might be considering. Another one of our important partners are the regional climate centers that NOAA funds. These, similarly to the RISAs, these are based at universities across the U.S., and they're very focused on the production and delivery of climate data and the use of that data at local, state, regional, national levels. They have been a great partner with RISA. A number of investigators on RISA teams have also been members of the regional climate centers, but mostly this is a great resource for data and collaboration in terms of applying climate information for decision making. I put this slide up here, actually from our office here, that talks a little bit about a webinar series that happened during the severe droughts in the southern U.S. A couple of years ago. And this is an example of where a RISA team, in this case our Southern Plains SCIP RISA, worked with the Regional Climate Service Director mentioned above, the Regional Climate Center, the State Climate Office, the National Weather Service, other university folks, resource managers in the region, and the NIDIS and the NIDIS office to develop this series on managing the drought in the Southern Plains. And this was a mechanism to convene a lot of experts as well as resource managers, share information on the ongoing drought, what was expected in the future, and the impacts of drought. So there's some really nice collaborations that can draw on the strengths of all these different partnerships, especially as these extreme events come along and a lot of different information is needed for decision makers. Oh, whoops. Hold on one sec. I lost my thing. Whoops. So next, I'm going to just touch on the Sustained Assessment Specialist component of this call for proposal. This is a new effort that we're undertaking here out of the Climate Program Office. As I mentioned back in the budget slide, RISA has gotten over the years some money from NOAA Assessments Program to participate and do research and engagement work in support of the National Climate Assessment. And we know this can be sometimes a heavy, well, it is a heavy lift. And so the idea of this component is to provide resources to have some specialists out in the regions who can work within the RISA network out in the regions and interface with the National Climate Assessment Office and match some of the goals that the National Climate Assessment is trying to achieve with RISA goals. This is an experiment for us, so we're trying to leave it somewhat flexible, especially as the National Climate Assessment is still working through what the next phase will look like. There is, I'll mention at the end, there's a sustained assessment report listed on the National Climate Assessment website, which I would encourage you to look at, and it talks about some of the goals of a sustained assessment process going forward. And we are very much interested in trying to support some specialists who can both do, synthesize research finding, act as a liaison, perhaps undertake some of the priorities in the sustained assessment report where it makes sense on vulnerability assessments or other priorities that they've outlined, and convey information on what's needed for the next assessment, gaps, information needs, as well as providing information for decision makers. We put in here that this would be a person definitely resident at a RISA and act as a shared resource across 2 to 3 RISAs. We, of course, understand that every region is different, and this would really be up to the applicant to determine the geographic scope this person would look at, the topics this person might look at, who this person might collaborate with within the RISA network, and to leave some flexibility as the National Climate Assessment determines sort of next steps in its process. So we can certainly answer questions about that at the end as well. So next I have costs. All of this information is listed either in our federal funding opportunity or our information sheet. So we have 2 components of what would be one proposal submitted to our office. There's the core RISA work, and as I mentioned, we put in a range here because we have a lot of budget uncertainty that we're facing for the next year or more. The sustained assessment specialist, we put in a range as well because it really depends a little bit on how much it would cost to have a person, what that person might be doing. It's also the amount of time that we can fund this person is will depend a lot on both budget appropriations and priorities for the National Climate Assessment going forward. They both depend on budget appropriations, but especially the length of time for the specialist. So you might want to think of this person a little bit more as a fellow or somebody that could come on board for a couple years and get a lot of great experience with the RISA and the National Climate Assessment, but it wouldn't be a long-term, it might not be able to be a long-term position because of shifting priorities with the National Climate Assessment. The review criteria, this is somewhat similar to what we've had in the past. We have, the way we do things is that we have a technical merit panel and a relevance panel, and with RISA we do those as a combined effort and a combined dialogue. The relevance is obviously relevance to RISA objectives, but also very much how much the applicant's approach for engaging decision makers, and we say for RISA building networks of relationships, help support those decision makers. So it's not just about doing great research and engaging stakeholders, but really where is the RISA in that broader network and how is that RISA plugging into networks of decision makers. The technical merit oh, and I should say also there's a sharing data component. I'm really sorry about the static. There's a sharing data component to the relevance score, which there's more information in the federal funding opportunity. It's really just there needs to be a plan for how you're going to publicly share your data. For the technical merit, it's about scientific merit and innovativeness, so being somewhat experimental and trying new things. The applicant's credibility in both research, and I put in here what we have in there is for RISA in particular, capacity building approaches, and then how well that you describe an institutional framework to implement the research that's articulated. The qualifications of the investigators obviously is important, including any work that you've done collaborating with decision-making communities. And then we take into account project costs if they're reasonable and within the range that we've proposed. So finally, I'll just put this up here to make sure that everybody reads both the full FFO and the RISA portion of the CSI information sheet, both of which you can find on our Climate Program Office website under the grant division. So, and I'm really sorry, I'm not sure how much I yelled over the static, but I'm happy to take questions, and Adam may have some more comments on things I've left out, or Sarah, and then we'll open it up for questions. So here, I'll switch with you.
Hi, folks. Sorry about the static. I really don't have much to add. Actually, Kaylin did a great job summarizing everything. I just put a finer point on a couple of items. So with respect to the regional coordination, we had the slide on the Managing Drought webinar series, and really that was just to illustrate that in a lot of cases, the unfolding climate events in the region can help bring some of the partners together, but also that we anticipate RISA's engaging some of those NOAA partners in response to needs and events that emerge in the region. So that was just an example of where an ongoing dialogue helped to figure out what are the how well do the science capabilities fit together, and kind of bring that into syncopation. And there's not one model, so that's just one example. And on that topic as well, there's language in the FFO and in the information sheet about being able to articulate the difference between RISA's and the Department of the Interior Science Centers and the USDA regional hubs. And so it's sort of in the same vein. We wanted to point out that we will have a resource for applicants. We're working with those other agencies on a 2-page document that lays out kind of the relationship that we see, the agencies see between those programs. It's not going to solve all the questions, and in fact, how those programs interact differs from region to region, which is fine. But it may help in thinking about how the RISA that you're proposing would relate to those programs. Finally, on sustained assessment specialists, I just wanted to point out that we would anticipate that folks would think about all of the considerations that you would think about for your RISA program as a whole, but for those sustained assessment specialists. So it's helpful to think about the geographic focus, the issue focus, how they relate to the program design. So you can kind of use those areas of the information sheet as a way to organize your thinking about how the sustained assessment specialist plugs in, and you may not think of, as far as the language in there about sharing an assessment specialist across 2 or 3 RISAs, that may apply, from a geographic perspective perspective, or it could also apply from an issue-focused perspective where, some of the RISAs across the network as a whole, or within a region, are working on similar issues, and that's a really great opportunity for synthesizing work that's emerging in the scientific community, which is, of course, a part of the assessment process. So that's it. I think we'll open it up for questions.
This is Tom. On the Sustained Assessment Specialist, Tom Beats at Michigan State. Will there be one, or you don't know how many is yet because it's dependent on budget constraints? One for this whole competition, or it's an open question at this point?
Thanks, Tom. That is an open question at this point.
Adam, to follow on the standpoint, I think here on the sustained specialist, is it only for the ones that are up for a rebid, or what about the others which are not up for a rebid? Can they also put one in? And if it is for the ones which are up for a rebid, you want this in the LOI as well, that we should indicate that we are also interested in a sustained assessment specialist LOI?
Okay, so I'll take the questions in order, and Kaylin can add. For the sustained assessment specialist, it is only open to people who are competing for a RISA award right now. So we're not accepting separate proposals for RISA programs and for sustained assessment specialists. It's just the people who are submitting proposals for. It should be a part of your proposal for a RISA award.
Okay.
On the question of the LOI, I think really at this stage what's most important is to focus your LOI on your proposal for a RISA program. I mean, if that's not, if you can't write a compelling LOI for a RISA program, then the sustained assessment specialist probably isn't going to fit very well. So we're really looking for LOIs to focus on the RISA program.
Okay.
Adam, this is Linda Soul from CC Run. Quick logistical question about the LOI. I noticed that it has a due date of August 10th, which is a Sunday. Was that intended?
This is Caitlin. I think what happened is CPO normally has a 21-day window, and we don't have control of when the FFO that lawyers, so I think it ended up happening that way. But
okay.
That actually is not a legally binding deadline, so it's fine if it comes in on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the full proposal is a legally binding deadline, so you can't miss I think it says 5 p.m. on that date. You have to get it in by then, or we cannot accept it. But the LOI is something that we highly encourage, but it's not legally binding.
And I'll just add to that Caitlin's right, that it's not the LOI is not a legally binding instrument, but and if in the case of an emergency came in on Monday, that's fine. But I think you'd be far better off to consider Friday the deadline, because we are using a new system where that collects the LOIs.
Oh, right. That's
and
true.
so
yeah.
just
You're right.
The first time around, I think to be on the safe side, you would consider Friday the deadline.
That works for me. I'll be going on vacation right after that. Okay, so should we expect to hear any feedback on the LOI, or is that more for your purposes that you understand what's coming?
No, you should expect to hear feedback within 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
And in fact, so because they're not legally binding, we can discourage proposals based on the LOIs, and we will do that if we see an LOI that's just way off the mark. That doesn't preclude you from still submitting a proposal, but we are also trying to be really respectful of people's time and resources and effort. And if if we're going so far as to discourage based on the LOI, it should give you serious pause.
That's fine. Thank you.
Adam, this is Vasu from Florida State. Does this sustained assessment specialist be identified in the proposal?
Oh, you mean a particular person?
That's right.
It doesn't have to be because you could articulate what this person would do, how you envision the scope of this person's work, maybe in terms of geography or topic or collaboration, but you don't necessarily have to have a specific person in mind.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just going to field a question here from the GoToWebinar. Rebecca, sorry to Rebecca Tharp. Sorry about the audio. We will get that straightened out before next week. With regard to your question about Vermont, it is outside of the area the regions that we're competing at this point. I mean, technically, I guess that does make you ineligible because, the regions, it sounds to me like the Great Lakes network is much larger than the scope of the regions that we generally compete, which are smaller, by the way, than the National Climate Assessment regions and the Weather Service regions. So, and that's in most cases, and that's by intention. So that does, right now we are not competing regions that include Vermont.
Adam and Caitlin and all, this is Radley. Question also about the sustained assessment coordinator. Do you have a sense of what level of sort of engagement and collaboration we might want to have with, say, the one or two other regions or RISAs? Would we sort of think about different ways that we could complement each other, or maybe just write that into the proposal in a way where it wasn't necessarily assumed that our RISA would lead it, but just try to write it in a way that whichever RISA got that person on site would maybe incorporate some of the things that would be relevant in the Northeast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is one thing we're looking at is, this is an experiment for us. We feel one of the reasons we feel good about trying to move in this direction and support these positions, even though, it's an experiment and there is some uncertainty, is that obviously, participating in the National Climate Assessment and you're getting on-the-ground experience in RISA, and you'd be connected to NOAA and USGCRP with respect to the sustained assessment and the National Climate Assessment, which generally has been, I think, a really good thing for those people's careers who have participated in the assessment. So, what though, to get at your question a little bit, I think, is what we're looking for is some creative ideas or institutional arrangements that that create some capacity, additional capacity over time, human capacity, expert capacity to move forward on priorities for the sustained National Climate Assessment. And in that score, I might also mention that we strongly encourage that you get your hands on the Sustained Assessment Report and look at the priorities. And those priorities, I think, are both sort of topical in nature and also methodological considerations for the assessment. And so I think what we're looking for is for you to give some thought to what's the best institutional arrangement to have a person out there who can really harness the science and assessment activities based on user needs in a way that would make a meaningful contribution to the sustained assessment. I don't know, Caitlin, if you have anything to add there.
No, just that because it's not clear yet exactly, what the next phase of the National Climate Assessment will look like. Some of this really should come from the applicant in terms of what you think would be useful to your region and topics that are of interest to your RISA that could feed into a sustained assessment and match some of the priorities, as Adam said, looking at the sustained assessment report. So because this has been, is still evolving, we didn't want to be too prescriptive in terms of, what we were asking for. So we're really just trying to also leave some flexibility for you all to propose some things from your experience of what you think is needed.
Great, that's helpful, thanks. So if I'm hearing right, it sort of sounds like some communication with other regions or potential RISAs might be appropriate, but sort of, getting all together to sort of, formally sync, 2 or 3 regions or submissions would be probably inappropriate and be on the call. But maybe a little bit of discussion with other regions or proposing RISAs might be reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, in terms of this, also in terms of just where the sustained assessment report is on the National Climate Assessment website, and there's a link down. You have to kind of scroll down in terms of their reports. At the bottom, it says the Sustained Assessment Special Report, and there's a link just so folks can find it. It's not hugely obvious when you first go in there.
Yeah, and it could be, again, like Caitlin said, it could be 2 or 3 regions, or it could be, if there was kind of a common thread across those in terms of a topic or a method that's relevant to the sustained assessment, or it could be 2 or 3 institutions within one region. If it's basically the same issue. Again, that you're thinking, same kind of issues you're thinking about with your RISA program of balancing depth and breadth.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, and folks can also be creative in terms of you don't have to keep yourself confined to the National Climate Assessment regions as they were defined for this current assessment, because we're not really sure whether they'll be the same next time, what will happen with that. So really more kind of what makes sense for synthesizing information, conveying gaps, drawing on lessons, and so you can be creative that way. We didn't want to have people constrained by those boundaries either.
Hi, this is Hydro from University of California, Riverside. I have a question about the geographic requirement. Does that mean that the PI, as long as the project is related to one of the 6 regions, does the PI have to come from those regions as well, or just from different places? It's okay.
So traditionally with RISA, the lead institution and most of the participating institutions are in the region. Some do have collaborators outside the region, but mostly the idea is to be place-based so that local and regional decision makers seem to turn heavily towards folks in their region. So we've tended to do that. I believe legally we cannot require that, but honestly, that's, it's mostly to be in the region, to be a resource for folks in that region.
Okay, I see. I think in one of your slides early on, you showed the relationship of RISA and its mission. I'm particularly interested in the water resources and water quality. Can you elaborate a bit more on what's RISA's mission and interest in terms of water issues as a result of climate change and viability?
So I'll say something, and Adam probably may want to add something. But so we do list. So to start in context, the climate component of NOAA has water resources as one of its societal challenges for climate. And water resources is an issue for all of at least our existing RISA activities, and I would assume is likely to be so going forward because it's such a integral part of so many issues. So from that standpoint, we've looked at probably more heavily water supply issues, but also some water demand issues, and a little bit on water quality. So it's really what's important for the region and, important in terms of climate sensitivity and planning for the future, but obviously water is an issue pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I've read the RFPs. I noticed that besides dividing them into different regions, was also divided into different programs, one which is related to the Coastal and Ocean Climate Application Program. Specifically, it asks for resilient coastal community and ecosystems and understand the human health risks with the coastal environment. I'm curious about, like when we write this letter of intent, do we need to specifically address, which sub-program it belongs to, and like these more topic-related issues?
Well, I think it's probably, let me put it to you this way. If you wrote an LOI and you didn't have any sense of some of the issues that are important to the region, I think it would probably signal some alarm bells for us in reviewing that. So that's, I guess you don't need to specify exactly what issues, but I think having some general sense of what are the important issues of the region is probably a valuable thing for the LOI.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Caitlin. I would just add, because I'm not sure if this is part of your question, if it's more of a research project with a single topic where you're working with decision makers, that's more appropriate to the COCA, the Coastal Ocean Climate Applications Program, or our SARP program, although SARP is got a narrower priority this year because they're going out for a center, but normally that would be the area if you're doing a water-focused project with decision makers, it'd be really more SARP. RISA's for if you're putting a whole team together to be a resource for the region across a range of different topics and a range of different expertise, that's really more RISA.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
And I should say that we did record this. I don't know if, although we don't have any static now, I don't know if that had anything to do with the static, but we did record this, and we're going to post it on the Climate Program Office website. So I'm sorry, Amrit, you told me where this is going to be. And
yeah, it'll be under the RISA page on the Climate Program Office website, and it'll be posted there in about 3 to 4 days or so.
Okay, so I don't know if folks heard that because Amit's across the table. So in about 3 to 4 days, the recording of this will be posted on the RISA portion of the Climate Program Office website. Maybe, hopefully, you can hear it a little better through that. So apologies. I don't know why we had static and now we don't. But
Caitlin and Adam, it's Zentert here again from UF. If you have following up questions over the next days, you okay that we call you directly, or how do you want us to handle this?
Well, I guess at this point, just in the interest of trying to keep all the, you can write us via email.
Okay.
And then that way we can keep a log of questions, and we'll get back to you because it's our intention to post up frequently asked questions. But then another opportunity is the next webinar next Monday. So next Monday at the same time, we'll be having a webinar. We're going to run through a lot of the same content, but we'll have, like we did today, we'll have a question and answer period.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, you guys. And before we go, this is Laura from Pacific RISA. I just have another question about the sustained assessment specialist. Logistically, and maybe there's not an answer for this, but say two recompeting RISAs this cycle identify a person that they want to share. Do we need to have the exact same narrative in our proposal text? Is the funding going to be split between those two institutions, or would the person be housed in one? I guess I'm just curious if you have an idea of how funding and proposal writing would work for a shared person.
Good question. So I think, as far as the narrative is concerned, it may, I don't know that it needs to be exactly the same, but if one institution's describing what that person's going to do in vastly different ways than the other, then that would probably not review well.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we would look for that to be coordinated pretty well, but it doesn't need to be, character for character, word for word the same, and there can be a little bit of difference. As far as sharing of cost, that we haven't really thought through that, but I'll be honest that it just seems like that would probably get pretty complex pretty quickly.
Yeah, this is Caitlin. That's a very good question, but I guess one issue would be, we're trying to provide resources for a person, so those resources would probably have to go to one place, and that person would have to be hosted in one place. Now, that person could go and visit the other place, and that would be great. But I think it would have to be, now you could both put it into your proposals, and then we could work through, as this all shakes out, we review everything, work that out. But in the end, the funding would go to one place for the person, and then that's where the person would be hosted, and then they can collaborate and visit in any shape or form from there, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, to be a little more specific too, I mean, I think the one concern we have with all the RISA awards and with, we look at RISAs as multi-institutional programs, and that's a very good thing. But one concern that, we all have, I'm sure on our side and on your side, is, the more you're passing, the more there are subawards or money goes from one institution to another, then you have to deal with indirect costs and overhead. And so if you're talking about sharing costs, though, in terms of the bulk of the resources, the salary, and the travel funds go to one institution at one RISA, but that another institution would make space for whenever they're going to visit for an extended length of time, they know they have a desk or something like that, then, we're totally amenable to that.
Okay, thanks, you guys.
And this is Caitlin. There was one question we got by email, and we are, as Adam said, going to put together our frequently asked questions list. But I thought I would raise it because this is often a question every year, because we have to keep within a certain page limit total for these proposals, and we have in the FFO, the full FFO for CPO lists the page limits for different sections, the totals, and we have some exceptions for RISA where we got, extra pages because we know you guys have teams and these are 5-year proposals, but we still had to have some limit on it so our reviewers aren't reading, 100-page proposals. So I would just say for things like if we say, just key investigators for current and pending, or I think we just put short bios. We don't need long CVs for folks, especially in today's world with the web. you put short bios and then refer to people's websites if the reviewers want more information on people. But certainly for current and pending, you can even just put like, one or two. We don't want you to, you have to fit all this in the page limit. So, you can both be somewhat creative, but also just, if you don't have room for everybody's current and pending, then just pick like the co-leads or, something that you feel is reasonable. You won't be rejected for that. We get questions about that a lot.
Hi, this is Hydro from UC Riverside again. Just have a follow-up question for Caitlin. I read the RFP again more carefully, and I think my question is, if I understand correctly, there are 3 CSI programs, of which RISA is one of it. I'm just curious about for that, and you mentioned about the SARP program is not for funding this year, and for the coastal program, the COCA, does it also has a geographic requirement?
No. Caitlin's double checking I'm buying her some time.
I know.
Double checking the information sheet, but I don't believe there is a geographic requirement. It's not a regionally based program. It's a project-based program, and as far as I know, there is not a regional focus. It's more thematic.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would be coastal, which includes the Great Lakes for NOAA. But I don't see anything that limits the geographic scale. And I should say for SARP, this is Nancy Beller-Sims' program. So all I'll say is SARP is has proposals, a call for proposals for a National Drought Monitoring Risk Management Center. So she's not soliciting for individual projects this year, as she did last year, but just for this center. But that is an open competition for that center.
Well, I'm particularly interested in because I'm located in California, so one of the ideas is to look at the drought climate adaptation issues related to coastal Southern California regions and the water issues. Do you think this fits into the coastal ocean climate application program in terms of just one standalone risk project-oriented proposal?
So I think the best thing for you to do is just to contact Adrian Antoine, the program manager for COCA.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, folks, well, mindful of the time, we will see whoever wishes to join us again in the same time next week. But thanks for those of you who came out, and good luck writing.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Adam, Caitlin. Bye.